David, this is Betty Harrison speaking. Do you remember that night in 1968 when I pulled you out of the burning helicopter? Captain Harrison, of course, I remember. What happened? I need your assistance, David. There are people here who require a lesson in respect. How much time do you have? They told me to leave the town within an hour, or not to leave at all. Hang tight, Betty. We are on our way. The most thrilling part is yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ended. Meanwhile, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss anything. In the quiet town of Methaven, Oregon, 75-year-old Elizabeth Harrison had no idea that this ordinary Thursday would turn into a day that changed everything. Her gray hair was neatly tied up in a bun. Her back remained straight despite her age, a testament to many years of military service. She steered her worn-out Ford toward Sam's gas station, the very same place she had visited for the past 35 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison," greeted Tommy, the young gas station attendant. His smile was genuine and bright. "As usual." "Fill it up, Tommy," Betty replied carefully, stepping out of the car. Her movements were measured but purposeful, demonstrating the discipline that helped her through a decade of service. The familiar scent of gasoline and morning dew filled the air as she began fueling her car, her thoughts drifting to the veterans' meeting she needed to attend later that morning. Those gatherings were more than just meetings. They were a link to her history, to men and women who truly understood what it meant to serve. A peaceful morning shattered as a distant rumble echoed through the air. The sound of motorcycles grew louder, more menacing, until the roar of engines filled the small gas station. 5 motorcycles arrived, then 10, and soon 15 pulled into the parking lot. Their chrome gleamed brightly under the morning sun. The Black Wolves had come. Betty's hand remained steady on the pump handle as she watched them through the reflection in her car's window. Military instincts kicked in automatically. Assess the danger, stay alert, remain calm. The leader, a man known as Raven, dismounted with practiced audacity. His leather jacket was adorned with patches telling stories of violence and intimidation. His eyes, cold as ice, locked onto her. "What do we have here?" Raven's voice carried across the parking lot, drawing chuckles from his gang. Grandma out for her morning stroll. Betty kept pumping gas, her expression unreadable. She had faced far worse in her time. The jungles of Vietnam taught her that real danger rarely announces itself so loudly. "Just filling up," she answered evenly. No trouble needed. One of the gang members, a tall man with a scruffy beard, moved closer. His eyes caught the shine of her license plate. "Hey, Raven, take a look at this. Vietnam veteran. Did you hear? The old lady claims she's a vet." Raven's laugh was sharp and mocking. "A woman veteran? What are you—" "Did you serve in Vietnam, sweetheart?" "I did. I served coffee to real soldiers." The words hit something deep inside Betty, yet her expression remained unchanged. They could not possibly understand the countless nights she spent flying as a medic on evacuation helicopters through enemy fire. The hundreds of soldiers she helped rescue from certain death. The medals stored in a box at her home. "I served my country," she said calmly, as she put away the fuel pump. Raven stepped closer. His boots scraped against the concrete. "Served your country. Let me tell you something about service, old lady. The only thing you served was dinner." Other gang members spread out, forming a loose circle around her car. Tommy disappeared inside the station. His face turned pale as he reached for the phone. Betty knew he was probably calling the police, but she also knew they would not arrive in time. "You should move along," Raven continued. His voice dropped to a threatening growl. Mythaven now belongs to the Black Wolves. Betty straightened her back. Her eyes met Raven's without a flicker of fear. Young man, I have faced things that would make your little gang run crying back to their moms. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an appointment. She moved to open the car door, but a gang member slammed it shut. The sound echoed across the parking lot like a gunshot. Betty's heartbeat did not even falter. She heard it. Real gunshots echoed as she felt the intense heat from genuine explosions. Perhaps you did not fully understand me? Raven leaned in close, his breath warm against her skin. This is our city now, and in our city, respect is earned. Betty's voice remained firm when she replied, Respect is something you earn, son. So far, all I see are boys pretending to be men. Her words lingered in the air like smoke, and for a moment, the only sound was the idle roar of motorcycle engines. Then Raven's face twisted into something ugly, something threatening. His hand shot forward, gripping Betty's arm with painful force. Want to learn about respect? We will teach you everything about respect. As his fingers dug into her flesh, Betty's mind raced back to the night in 1968, when she pulled a young soldier from the burning wreckage of his helicopter. That soldier grew up to become Colonel David Steele Carter, now the leader of the biggest veterans biker club in the state. The very same David Carter who once told her, If you ever need anything, Betty, anything at all, just call. She had never had to make that call all these years, but looking into Raven's eyes, seeing the cruelty there, she knew this moment was about to change. The Black Wolves had no idea what they had just started, but soon they would learn a harsh lesson about true power, real courage, and genuine respect. And it all began with a single phone call. Raven's grip on Betty's grip tightened as his gang approached. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement of the gas station, turning the scene into a grim portrait of intimidation. But Betty Harrison did not survive Vietnam by surrendering to bullies. Take your hand off me, she said. Her voice carried the same commanding tone she used when leading helicopter crews through enemy fire. Something in her voice made Raven hesitate for a moment. His fingers loosened slightly, yet his smirk stayed firmly in place. Or what, Granny? You gonna call the cops on us? I'm not making threats, Betty replied calmly, carefully freeing her hand from his grasp. Never did. But I promise you this, son, you're making a mistake. One of the other gang members, a younger man with a snake tattoo wrapping around his neck, laughed sharply. You hear that, Raven? The old lady's making promises. Betty seized their moment of amusement and slipped into her car. Her movements were deliberate and controlled. Through the windshield she could see Tommy inside the station, still on the phone, his face tight with worry. She knew the local police would do little. The Black Wolves had terrorized Mythaven for months, and law enforcement seemed powerless to stop them. You're not going anywhere, Raven stated, resting his hand on her car hood. Not until we teach you some respect. Respect? Betty started the engine, the familiar roar of her old Ford bringing some comfort. Let me share something about respect. I earned mine by rescuing twice as many people as you, flying helicopters under enemy fire while bullets whizzed past my head. What have you done besides terrorizing innocent civilians? Her words struck a nerve. Raven's expression darkened as he signaled his gang. In moments, they surrounded her car on their motorcycles, blocking every exit. Get out of the car, Raven demanded. Instead of complying, Betty reached for her phone. The move made several gang members tense, expecting a call to the police. But Betty was contacting no authorities. Not yet. Want to see what real respect looks like? She asked, her fingers dancing over the keypad. Just wait. Raven laughed, the sound bouncing off the gas station's metal roof. So you're calling for backup? Maybe your police granddad? Call whoever you want. We will still be here. Betty's mind flashed back to an excruciating night in Vietnam. The rain poured like buckets, visibility nearly zero, but she caught a distress signal. A squad was pinned down under heavy fire. Among them was a young lieutenant named David Carter. Flying blind, relying solely on her instincts and skill, she pulled them all out alive. "You boys ever hear of the Veteran Guardians?" she asked, pressing the first number. Several gang members shifted uneasily. The Veterans Guardians were highly recognized within biker circles. This motorcycle club consisted solely of combat veterans and was led by the legendary David Steele Carter. They were not just any biker group. They operated in an organized and disciplined manner, earning respect even from the toughest criminals. "What does this have to do with anything?" asked the man with the snake tattoo, though there was a hint of doubt in his voice. "It's simple," replied Betty, while continuing to dial the number. "You see, back in '68, there was a young lieutenant whose helicopter was shot down deep behind enemy lines. Everyone claimed it was a suicidal mission to fly after him, but I flew anyway." The phone began to ring as Raven's expression fluctuated between anger and confusion. "That lieutenant," Betty went on, her voice echoing through the suddenly quiet parking lot, "his name was David Carter. Nowadays people call him Steele, and he owes me a favor." The call connected. A rough voice answered, "Carter, David here. Betty Harrison, right? Remember that night near Kaysen?" There was a pause before Steele's tone softened with recognition. "Betty, of course I remember. I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for you. What happened?" Betty's eyes locked onto Raven's as she said, "I have some young guys here who need a lesson in respect. The Black Wolves. They seem to think Mithavin belongs to them now." Steele's voice changed instantly, turning cold and unyielding. "Where is the gas station? Sam's place? Do not rush to come. Those boys will not go anywhere." When she ended the call, the mood in the parking lot shifted. Several gang members exchanged nervous glances. The Black Wolves could control Mythaven through fear, but the Veterans Guards were an entirely different matter. Raven tried to keep his composure, but Betty could see the doubt lingering in his eyes. "You are bluffing. Steele will not show up just because some old lady called." "Are you sure about that?" Betty asked. A faint smile played at the corners of her lips. "Want to stay and find out?" In the distance, the distinct rumble of approaching motorcycles began to fill the air. This was not the chaotic roar of the Black Wolves' bikes. It sounded different. It was a synchronized roar from a disciplined unit moving as one. Raven's face slightly paled as the sound grew louder. "Get on!" he barked at his gang, trying to maintain control of the situation. "We are not done here, old lady, by any means." "No," Betty agreed, watching as they mounted their bikes. The engines roared to life as they sped out of the parking lot. But now the rules had changed. Raven pointed at Betty. His finger trembled slightly. "This is not over. You just made things more complicated for yourself." Betty watched them leave, her expression calm. She knew they would return. Thugs always came back. But now the rules were different. As the sound of the Veterans Guards grew closer, she allowed herself a small, knowing smile. A faint smile appeared. The Black Wolves were about to discover what true power looks like. The lesson had only just begun. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of dawn. In its glow, Betty could spot the first bikes of the Veteran Guards appearing on the horizon. Their chrome gleamed like armor. The real story was about to unfold. The veteran guards arrived like thunder. Their bikes moved in perfect formation as they filled the gas station parking lot. 50 riders strong, each a battle-seasoned veteran. Their leather jackets bore military patches and unit insignias. At the forefront stood Colonel David Steele Carter. His silver hair caught the morning light. His presence demanded respect without a single word spoken. Tommy, the gas station attendant, watched wide-eyed through the window as the veterans filled his lot. These were not chaotic, undisciplined riders, as he was used to seeing. These people moved with military precision. Their bikes formed a defensive perimeter around Betty's Ford. Steele was the first to dismount, removing his helmet to reveal a face marked by time and experience. His eyes were as sharp as ever. They immediately found Betty, and a smile broke through his stern expression as he approached her. "Long time no see, Captain Harrison," he said. His voice carried the weight of a shared history. "Too long, David," Betty replied, straightening instinctively. "Old habits died hard, though I wish our reunion were under better circumstances." The atmosphere grew tense as Steele's expression hardened when he glanced toward the direction where the Black Wolves were running. "Tell me everything," he demanded. As Betty recounted the morning's events, more veterans gathered around, their faces darkening with every detail. These were men who understood respect. They had earned it the hard way, battling through jungles and deserts, witnessing their comrades fall and rise alongside them. "Black Wolves," spat one of the veterans. "They've been causing trouble all along the coast. It's time someone taught them a lesson." Steele raised his hand to silence the murmurs. "Betty, you actually taught me something important back in '68. Do you recall what you told me that night, Captain? When everyone else said the mission was impossible, Betty simply smiled. I told you courage is not the absence of fear. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." "Exactly," David nodded. "And you showed us what that meant when you flew into that hot zone. I lost count of how many bullets hit your helicopter that night." One of the younger veterans stepped forward, eyes wide with recognition. "Wait, that's Angel Casona, the medic who saved the entire 5th Squad." "The one and only," confirmed David, although she never liked the nickname. Betty brushed off the title. "There were dozens of medics braver than me. I was just doing what needed to be done." "Just doing what needed to be done," David echoed with laughter. "She says it perfectly. It feels as if it never even happened." "Guys, this woman flew rescue helicopters through enemy fire more times than anyone could count. She saved my life and countless others. Now some punk gang thinks they can intimidate her." The veterans' faces hardened with determination. These people understood duty. They understood loyalty. Each one served, knew the horrors of combat, and the brotherhood it forged. "The Black Wolves will come back," said Betty. Her voice was steady. "They are not the kind to let it go." "Let them come," replied David. His tone was dark. "But first we need to know what we are dealing with. Tell me about their leader, this Raven." As Betty described the gang leader, Styles' expression grew more worried. He recognized the type. A thug who had never faced real resistance, confusing fear with respect. "They had been terrorizing Mythaven for months," added Tommy nearby, finally finding the courage to join the discussion. "The police cannot or will not do anything about them." David slowly nodded. A plan was forming in his mind. "Betty, you have a veterans meeting today, don't you?" "Yes, but under these circumstances you will go," interrupted David with a smile. "Just like any other day, but you will not go alone." He turned to his team. His voice took on the commanding tone that led them through battle. "Alpha Team, You are on escort. Beta and Charlie begin patrols. I want eyes on every corner of Mythaven. The Black Wolves want to play their games. Let's show them how veterans handle things. The veterans moved with practiced precision, breaking into assigned squads. David turned back to Betty. His expression softened. We can handle this, Captain? The old way, Betty replied, glancing at the gathering of veterans, men who understood sacrifice and honor in ways the Black Wolves never could. Just try not to tear apart the town in the process, David. Mythaven has been my home for 40 years. No promises, David smirked, though his eyes were serious. These boys needed to learn that respect is not taken by force. It is earned, and they were about to get a hell of a lesson. As the veterans mounted their bikes, ready to escort Betty to her meeting, she could not help but recall another time, another place, when these same men were young soldiers fighting for their lives. Now they were here again, ready to fight once more. Not for a country this time, but for something just as important, for the right to live without fear. The morning had started with the Black Wolves being intimidated. Now, as the engines of the Veterans' Guardians roared to life, the situation was becoming something entirely different. The war for the soul of Mythaven was about to begin, and Betty Harrison, despite being 75 years old, found herself once more at the center of it all. Just like in Vietnam, lives hung by a thread. But this time, the enemy was not hiding in jungles. They were right here in plain sight, and they would not be going anywhere. Still's voice rose above the roar of the engines. Just like in the old days, Captain Betty smiled as she climbed into her vehicle, veterans gathering around her. Just like back then, Lieutenant. Just like the old times. The convoy pulled away from the gas station, a show of power and order that could not be more different from the chaotic presence of the Black Wolves. Behind them, Tommy stood watching, a grin spreading across his face. Something was shifting in Mythaven, and for the first time in a month, it felt like a change for the better. Through the city, in an abandoned warehouse serving as the Black Wolves' clubhouse, Raven paced the oil-stained floor. His boots echoed against the concrete, while his gang watched nervously. The morning meeting had shaken their usual confidence, although no one admitted it openly. Veterans' guards? Raven spat, kicking an empty beer can across the floor. Of all the people in this worthless town, we had to pick her. Snake Tattoo leaned against his bike, trying to keep his tough appearance. So what? It's just another motorcycle club. We've dealt with rival clubs before. One of the older members, a man nicknamed Diesel, shook his head. No, these guys are different. They have military training and discipline. They have seen real war. We have seen a lot of action, growled Raven, but there was a hint of doubt in his voice. Not like them, Diesel insisted. I've heard stories about Steel. He leads the Veterans' Guards, like a military unit. And that woman, even if she truly is the pilot they call the Angel of Kessin, I do not care if she were the Queen of England. Raven exploded with anger. His fist slammed against the closest locker. This is our town now. We cannot allow some old lady and her veteran friends to push us out. We will lose everything we have built here. Meanwhile, Betty's convoy arrived at the Veterans Center. The veteran guards on motorcycles formed a protective perimeter around the parking lot. When she stepped out of the vehicle, several veterans waiting for the meeting came forward to greet her. Their eyes widened in awe at the impressive escort. Quite a grand entrance, smiled Sarah Chen, a Gulf War veteran who led the Veterans Support Group. Although I heard you had quite a morning. News travels fast, Betty remarked, adjusting her cardigan. It's hard to miss 50 veteran guard bikes rolling through town, Sarah replied. Do you want to tell us what happened inside the Veterans Center? As the meeting began, Betty shared the morning's events. The room was packed with veterans from various eras, spanning from Vietnam to recent conflicts. Their reactions ranged from anger to grim determination as they listened to how one of their own had been treated. "I remembered something this morning," said Betty. Her voice carried through the silent room. "Something from my last mission in Vietnam. We were pulling out. A group of Marines was under intense fire. The helicopter was taking hits, its hydraulics failing, but we could not leave those boys behind." The room fell silent as everyone leaned in to listen. Even the guards and veterans posted outside came inside to hear her story. Later, one of the young Marines asked me why I went back for them when everyone else called it too dangerous. I told him something I have never forgotten. Sometimes the greatest act of bravery is standing up for others when everyone else looks away. David, who was standing at the back of the room, slowly nodded. "This is exactly what we are doing now, Betty. Standing up for Mythaven." But before anyone could respond, the distant roar of motorcycles filled the air. Through the windows, clouds of dust were rising from the road leading toward the Veterans Center. The Black Wolves were returning, and this time they brought reinforcements. It looked like Raven had called for backup. David grimly counted the approaching bikes. There were at least 30 additional riders. Betty stood up. Her movement captured every gaze in the room. "David, I will not allow violence in the Veterans Center. These people come here to heal, not to fight." "I agree," David replied as he already moved toward the door. "Delta Team, escort our veterans out through the back entrance. Everyone else, stay seated. We are moving this somewhere else." The Veterans Guards acted with tactical precision, assisting the meeting participants. Veterans prepared themselves, ensuring safety ahead of the confrontation. Betty watched as Sarak Chen skillfully managed the evacuation, proving that military training never truly fades away. Outside, the Black Wolves and their reinforcements lined up across the street from the Veterans Center. Their motorcycles created an intimidating barrier of chrome and steel. Raven sat in the middle, his face twisted with fury and wounded pride. "Come out, old woman!" he shouted, his voice echoing across the parking lot. "You and your veteran friends cannot hide there forever." David stepped forward first. His presence demanded attention. Behind him, the Veterans Guards took their positions, forming a precise and threatening line. Betty arrived last, her head held high, showing no trace of fear. "Son," she called to Raven, "you are making a mistake. This is not about pride or territory, but about right and wrong. Step back before someone gets hurt." Raven's reply was cut off by the sudden arrival of police sirens. 3 patrol cars stormed into the parking lot, their lights flashing. Police Chief Roberts, a Marine from Vietnam, stepped out of the lead vehicle. "No one fights in my Veterans Center," he declared, his hand resting heavily on his holster. "Raven, you and your boys need to leave, now." The tension in the air was palpable. Raven glanced from the police to the Veterans Guards, then to Betty. His face was a mask of rage and frustration. Finally, he started his bike, growling, "This is not over yet." "No way." When the Black Wolves reluctantly retreated, and their reinforcements followed, David turned to Betty. "He is right about one thing. This is not over yet." Betty watched as the dust clouds vanished beyond the horizon. Her expression was thoughtful. "No, it is not over. But maybe that is not such a bad thing. Sometimes a storm is needed to clear the air." Chief Roberts approached them, holstering his weapon. "Betty, David, we need to talk. The Black Wolves have been a problem for months. But now they are desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." The morning sun reached its peak, casting sharp shadows across the Veterans Center's parking lot. When Betty looked at the gathered faces, police, veterans, friends, she knew that Mythvi was about to change. The only question was whether it would be for better or worse. The battle for their town's soul had just begun, and once again she found herself at the heart of it. Just like in Vietnam, where lives hung by a thread. But this time, the enemy was not hidden in the jungle. They were right here in plain sight, and they were not willing to back down without a fight. Chief Roberts led Betty, David, and several senior guards and veterans into the Veterans Center conference room. The blinds were drawn, casting striped shadows across the wooden table where they gathered. "Let me be clear," Roberts began, spreading out a map of Mythvi on the table. "The Black Wolves are systematically taking over this town. They started with extortion on 3rd Street, then moved on to intimidating business owners. The business in the historic district has changed drastically. Now, half of the town hesitates to speak up." David leaned forward. His fingers traced the marked locations. "How many are we dealing with?" "The main group consists of around 20 riders," Roberts answered. "But after today's event, Raven called in reinforcements. We might be facing as many as 75 riders in total, spread across 3 affiliated gangs." Betty quietly examined the map. Her mind worked with the tactical precision that had kept her alive through countless missions. "They are not causing trouble by chance. There is a pattern here." She pointed at several places. "Look, they have established a presence along every major route in and out of Mythaven. They are not just terrorizing the city, they are controlling it." "Smart observation," Roberts nodded. "But that is not the worst part. Intelligence suggests they are involved in drug trafficking, using Mythaven as a distribution hub." David's expression darkened. "Things will no longer be calm." "Calm down, David," Betty warned. "We have to be smarter than them." "Tell me, boss, why didn't you act against them sooner?" Robert's face became bitter. "Politics," he said. "The city council is worried about escalation. Plus, there is reason to believe someone in the council is on their payroll." Meanwhile, across town in the Black Wolves warehouse, Raven held his own war council. Reinforcements brought not only more numbers, but also the experience of hardened riders who had dealt with rival gangs before. "The veteran guards are different," said Ryder, who came from one of the allied groups. "They possess military training and discipline. They are not your ordinary motorcycle club." Raven slammed his fist on the table. "I do not care who they are. This is disrespect. That old woman humiliated us in front of the entire town. We cannot allow this to stand. We can gather and leave." "Maybe we should," Diesel cautiously suggested, looking for an easier area to control. His idea earned a harsh shove from Raven. "This is no longer about territory. This is personal. That woman, those veterans, they think they are superior to us. They believe they can just walk in and take what belongs to us." "What?" Back at the Veterans Center, the strategic session continued. Sarah Chen joined them, bringing coffee and her own military intelligence experience. "We need to understand what we are truly fighting for," Betty said, her voice capturing everyone's attention. "This is not about land or pride. It is about the soul of Medhaven." She stood up and moved toward the window. "I have lived here for 40 years, watched children grow, and families put down roots. The Black Wolves are not just a threat to our safety, they threaten our way of life." David nodded slowly. "You are right. But how do we fight them without turning Medhaven into a battleground?" "Just like I fought in Vietnam," Betty replied, turning back to face them. "With precision, intelligence, and choosing our battles carefully." She returned to the map, pointing to specific locations. They forced themselves to appear strong, but Spreading fear. Yet, when fear spreads too quietly, even the strongest force becomes vulnerable. Roberts leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you suggest?" Betty explained. "We start with the businesses they extort. The veteran guards provide protection and show the town they are not alone. Meanwhile, we gather proof of their drug operations, real evidence that even the city hall cannot ignore." Sarah warned, "They will lie down and endure this." "No," Betty agreed firmly. "That is exactly what we expect. When people get angry, they become careless and make mistakes." David smiled darkly, just like that night in Kisane. "Draw them in, make them put their strength into it, then strike where they are weakest." "Exactly," Betty nodded. "But this time, we are not fighting with bullets. We are fighting for hearts and minds. We show Mithaven there are good people ready to stand up against bullies." Roberts rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "This could work, but it is risky. The Black Wolves will seek revenge." "Of course they will," Betty said calmly. "But this time, we will be ready. And this time, they will learn what real power looks like." Outside, the sun began its descent, casting long shadows over Mithaven. In homes and shops across the city, people watched and waited, wondering what would come next. The arrival of the veteran guards gave them something they had not felt in months: hope. David stood up. His decision was made. "All right, Betty, we will do it your way. But I want you to be protected at all times. Raven is the kind of person who takes things personally." Betty gave a slight smile. "David, I have been shot at by better people than Raven, but I appreciate the concern." When the meeting ended and the plans were set into motion, Sarah took Betty aside. "You know you are starting something here, right? This could change everything." "That is exactly what I am hoping for," Betty replied. Her eyes were firm with determination. "Sometimes things need to be changed. Sometimes you have to make them change. The war for Mithaven is about to enter a new phase, not one of violence and chaos, but one of strategy and purpose. Just like she did in Vietnam, Betty Harrison is about to teach another lesson about courage, respect, and the true meaning of strength. And this time, the entire city will be watching." Dawn broke over the historic district of Mithaven, painting the old brick buildings with a golden hue. The street was quiet except for the steady hum of motorcycles, not the chaotic roar of Black Wolves, but a disciplined hum of bikers, guards, and veterans posted at strategic points along 3rd Street. Inside Vincent Hardware, the oldest store in Mithaven, Frank Vincent was experiencing his first peaceful morning in months. His hands trembled slightly as he counted his cash drawer. Not from fear this time, but relief. "They usually show up around this time," he said to the 2 guards and veterans stationed inside his store. "Every morning like clockwork, demanding their money for protection." One of the veterans, a former Army Ranger named Mike, nodded grimly. Not today. They would not get it. Betty sat in her usual booth at Diana's cafe across the street sipping coffee and watching the scene unfold. David sat opposite her. His own coffee remained untouched. "They are going to check on us," he said softly. "Most likely that is what I expect today," Betty replied. Her eyes scanned the street. Raven was not the kind to back down easily. His pride simply would not allow it. Like on cue, a distant sound of approaching motorcycles filled the air. The Black Wolves appeared at the end of the 3rd Street. Their bikes gleamed in the morning light. Raven led the pack, but stopped briefly when he saw the veterans' guardians' positions. "Right on schedule," Betty muttered, setting down her coffee cup. The Black Wolves kept their bikes idling, seemingly unsure how to proceed. The members of the Veterans Guardians stood still without reacting. They were simply watching their presence, a clear message. Raven revved his engine angrily and tearfully heading toward Vincent Hardver. Two members of the Veterans Guardians stepped out to meet him. Their stance was relaxed, but ready. "This is private property," Mike said calmly. "Mr. Vincent is no longer interested in your type of protection." "Is that true?" growled Raven, his face flushed with rage. "Why don't we just ask Frank himself?" From inside the shop, more veterans appeared, a solid wall of support. Frank Vincent emerged from the building. David stood straight in front of his store for the first time in many months. Behind him, more members of the guards and veterans began to appear. A solid wall of support formed. "Did you hear them, Raven?" Frank's voice echoed down the suddenly quiet street. "We do not need your protection. Right now, real veterans are standing guard for us." Raven's hand twitched toward his jacket, but froze as he noticed how many veterans of the guards had gathered around him. They did not draw weapons or make threats. They simply stood there. Their presence was an unmistakable warning. "This is not over, old man," Raven spat at Frank. Nothing about this was finished. He turned his eyes and found Betty through the cafe window. Their gazes locked, and Betty caught a flash of something dangerous on his face. Hurt pride mixed with a deadly rage. "Did you do this?" he shouted, pointing at her. "Do you really think you can just walk in and turn everyone against us?" Betty slowly rose, leaving the cafe. Every eye on the street tracked her as she stepped outside. "What exactly did you build, son?" Her voice rang firm, reaching every ear. "Fear and intimidation are not building. They are destruction." Other business owners now emerged from their shops, watching the confrontation unfold. The Black Wolves shifted nervously on their bikes, outnumbered and overwhelmed by the disciplined presence of the veteran guards. "You do not understand a thing." Raven's voice quivered with fury. "This city was lifeless before we arrived. We brought it back, strong." "No," Betty replied, taking another step forward. "You made it frightened." "There is a difference." She gestured toward the veterans surrounding them. "These men and women have experienced true power. They fought real battles. They were just tormenting innocent people. They understand something you will never grasp. Respect is not taken by force. It is earned through actions." Raven's face twisted with fury. He stepped toward Betty, but immediately found his path blocked by David and 3 other veterans. "Think very carefully about your next move, son." David's voice was gentle, yet carried the sharpness of steel. Very carefully. For a long moment, tension crackled in the air. Then Raven retreated. His movements were sharp, fueled by suppressed rage. "This is our city," he growled as he climbed onto his bike. "You want war? You got it." The Black Wolves tore away, leaving behind clouds of exhaust and threats. When their noise faded, the street fell quiet for a moment. Then, surprisingly, someone began to clap. Others joined in. The sound grew louder as the business owners and residents fully emerged from their shops. Frank Vincent approached Betty, tears brimming in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "We were just waiting for someone to stand up for them. We were simply afraid." "You do not have to be scared anymore," Betty assured him. "But this is not over yet. Raven will come back, and he will be looking for a fight." David joined them. His face was serious. "We won the first clash. But you are right. This is only the beginning. He will hit hard, trying to set an example." "Let him try," Betty replied, watching the gathering crowd of townspeople. "Every move he makes now only reveals to Mithoven who he truly is and who we really are. Sarah Chen arrived, slightly out of breath. She had just received word that the Black Wolves were assembling in their warehouse, calling for more reinforcements. Betty nodded, unsurprised. Fine, let them come. The more forces they invest, the more exposed they become. She turned to address the gathered veterans and townsfolk. Today we showed them that Mythaven no longer fears. But tomorrow, they will try to remind us why we should have. We must be ready. The sun had fully risen by now, flooding the street with bright light. The shadow of fear hanging over Mythaven was lifting, yet everyone knew the real storm was still ahead. Raven and his gang would not leave quietly or accept defeat easily. But looking at the faces around her, veterans standing tall, townspeople finding their courage, Betty knew they had already won something important. They had restored Mythaven's dignity and spirit. Now, they just needed to hold on to it. Night fell over Mythaven like a velvet curtain, bringing a restless silence. The veteran guards maintained their patrols. Their bikes moved silently through the darkened streets. It was 3 days after the confrontation on 3rd Street. Tension was building like a storm cloud gathering before a tempest. Betty sat in her living room, scanning messages from various Watchman veteran units. Sarah had set up an improvised command center in her kitchen, complete with radio communication and a detailed map of Mythaven, marked with the known locations of the Black Wolves. Activity was reported at the warehouse. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. A large group is moving out. At least 30 bikes. David's response came swiftly. All units hold their positions. Let's see what they have planned. Betty approached the window, gently pulling back the curtain. 2 veterans were parked across the street. Their bikes were dark and silent. She knew more were nearby, hidden in strategic positions throughout her neighborhood. The quiet was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. A fire at Vincent Hardware. The voice shouted through the radio. Several intruders were advancing quickly. Before anyone could reply, another message cut in. Molotov cocktails at Diana's cafe. They are hitting multiple targets. David's tone remained resolute. All units converge on the city center. Defense teams stay at assigned locations. This is what we trained for. Betty was already moving, grabbing her car keys. Sarah stepped in front of her, shaking her head. You're their prime target, Betty. You need to stay safe. They're my friends out there, Betty responded, her voice firm. I started this. I will not hide while they suffer for it. The radio crackled again. They targeted a business owned by veterans. Pete's auto shop was engulfed in flames. Sarah and Betty exchanged a glance. This was no random act of violence. The Black Wolves were sending deliberate signals. Let me pass, Betty demanded. This time Sarah did not argue. They rushed to Betty's car accompanied by their security team. The heart of Mythaven City had turned into a battleground. The Black Wolves struck swiftly and efficiently, hitting the establishments that dared to stand against them. Fire trucks had already arrived at Vincent Hardware, where Frank Vincent stood watching the blaze consuming his family's legacy. They knew exactly when to strike, David remarked as Betty approached. They had to have inside knowledge of the patrol schedules. Your mole is in City Hall, Betty said grimly. They were trying to show the town what happens when people resist. Nearby, Diana's cafe suffered less damage thanks to the quick action of veteran guards inside. Diana herself, a tough woman in her 60s, was helping direct the firefighters, cursing the Black Wolves in vivid language. This is only the beginning, David warned while watching the flames reflecting off nearby windows. Raven is showing us what he is willing to do. Next time, it will be worse. As if confirming his words, a new voice cut through their radio. They were at the Veterans Center with several hostile armed men. Betty's blood ran cold. The Veterans Center was more than just a building. It was a sanctuary for veterans struggling with the scars of war, offering some semblance of peace amid the turmoil. Visible as well as unseen. "That crosses the line," growled David while already moving toward his bike. "Wait," called Betty. "This is exactly what they want. To subtly draw out our forces, to provoke an emotional response." She turned to face the gathered veterans and townsfolk. "This is not about damaging property. Raven aims to break our spirit, to make us feel powerless once more." Frank Vincent stepped forward. His face was smeared with soot. "So, what do we do then? Just let them burn down our town?" "No," Betty answered firmly, her voice carrying the same authority that commands respect in war zones. "We show them that fire tempers steel. It does not destroy it." She looked out over the assembling crowd. Veterans, business owners, residents who had lived in fear too long. In their expressions, she saw not defeat, but determination. "Raven thinks they can shatter us by breaking our things," she continued. "But Mythaven is not about buildings. It is about people. And people standing united are stronger than any gang." As if emphasizing her message, more townsfolk began arriving, bringing water, supplies, and offers of help. The Black Wolves intended to flaunt their power, but unwittingly revealed something else: the true strength of community. "Sarah," Betty turned to her friend, "contact every business owner in town. Tell them we are calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. It is time. Mythaven will show Raven what real power means." David nodded with understanding in his eyes. "Are you considering the operation? The thunder roaring." "Something like that," Betty said with a grim smile. "But this time, we are not just fighting for territory. We are fighting for our home." The fires kept blazing, yet they revealed more than just destruction. They showed neighbors helping one another, veterans standing guard, and a town finally ready to resist. The Black Wolves sought to break the spirit of Mythaven. Instead, they forged it even stronger. As dawn approached, Betty stood before the damaged Veterans Center, watching volunteers already begin repairs. The attacks from the previous night aimed to demoralize them, but looking at the determined faces around her, she realized Raven had made a critical mistake. He revealed his intentions too soon, played his cards too aggressively. Now it was their turn, and Betty Harrison had learned a thing or two about strategy over her 80 years. The war for Mythaven was entering a new stage, and this time they would set the terms of battle. By dawn, the community center was packed. Every seat was filled with business owners, residents, and veterans. The air smelled of coffee and purpose as Betty stood at the podium, surveying the crowd. Behind her, a large map of Mythaven covered the wall, marked with the sites of last night's attacks. "Last night, the Black Wolves showed us what they think strength means," Betty began, her voice firm. "Today, we will show them what true strength is." Frank Vincent stood up, ready to respond. Her face still carried the ash-colored smudges from the burned-down store. "They have numbers, weapons, and someone in the city hall feeding them information. That is exactly why we are going to win," Betty responded. A faint smile crossed her face, because they believed that these factors make them powerful. "But I learned something in Vietnam that Raven will never understand. True strength is not about how much damage you can inflict. It is about how much you can endure and keep fighting." David stepped forward, unfolding a document. "We hold the deed to the old factory on Riverside Street. The Veterans Guard applied to purchase it last week, and the deal was approved yesterday. Starting this morning, it will become our new headquarters. A whisper spread throughout the crowd. The factory stood at a strategic crossroads, overlooking much of downtown Mythaven. But that's not all, Betty continued. Every business they attacked last night, we will restore. Not just one, but all of them. Today, Diana from the cafe stood up. How? Most of us do not have insurance covering gang violence. You do not need it, Sarak Chen declared, stepping beside Betty. The Veterans Guard established a community recovery fund, with every member contributing. We have enough to repair every damaged business and still have some left over. The room erupted in amazed whispers. David raised his hand for silence. This is Phase 1, he said. Phase 2. Making sure. To ensure it does not happen again. Betty pointed at the map. The Black Wolves believe they can rule Mythaven through fear. Yet they have a vulnerability. They rely on the city's infrastructure to function. They need gas stations for their bikes, restaurants for gatherings, streets to ride through. She turned to face the crowd, her eyes burning with strategic determination. Starting today, every business in Mythaven can operate under new safety protocols. Members of the Guard and veterans will train your employees on security measures voluntarily. We will assist in installing panic buttons, surveillance systems, and emergency response plans. Official security contracts will be finalized within 1 week. Someone shouted about their insider in City Hall. It's already decided. Police Chief Roberts stepped forward from the back. We fed them false patrol routes last night. The information they obtained was exactly what we wanted them to have. Now we know precisely how they gather their intelligence. The spark of hope began to spread across the room. Betty could see it on their faces, knowing they were no longer powerless. Here is what happens next, she went on. Every business they have attacked will remain open after dusk. We are working together, veterans, residents, all of us showing them they cannot shut us down or break our spirit. Frank Vincent stood again. My store was hit hard. Dusk is coming quickly. You will have support, David assured. Half of the guards are veterans, experienced professionals. The other half, well, we are quite good at following orders and getting the job done. Sarah stepped forward holding a stack of papers. We divided the city into districts. Each district has a coordinator, a veteran, and a civilian liaison. Everything is organized. Everything is planned. All we need now is you. The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of their proposal sunk in. Then Diana stood up. What are we waiting for? My cafe is not going to rebuild itself. The meeting turned into a coordination session. People grouped according to districts, receiving assignments and managing resources. The veteran guards distributed radios and security gear, while Sarah's team handed out detailed recovery plans. Betty watched it all from the podium, recalling a different time, a different place where she had witnessed people uniting in the face of adversity. Raven tried to break them apart, but all he succeeded in was bringing them closer together. Outside, the sound of construction had already begun. Members of the guards and veterans removed burnt debris from Vincent Hardver, while local contractors delivered fresh supplies. The street was filled with people carrying lumber, tools, and hope. You know, Raven is not going to accept this peacefully, David said quietly, as he joined Betty by the podium. I'm counting on that, she replied. But this time, when he strikes, he will no longer be targeting isolated objectives. He will be facing a united front. Facing a united front, Sarah approached with an update from the radio. We have Black Wolves watching from the edges of the town. They can see everything. Good, Betty nodded. Let them watch. Let them witness what happens when they try to break something that refuses to be broken. As the sun climbed higher, Mythaven transformed into a hive of activity. Veterans worked side by side with civilians. Businesses supported one another. And the community Raven tried to terrorize into submission revealed its true nature. A spirit of resilience, unity, and determination shone through. By midday, Vincent Hardver had a new roof. Diana's Cafe offered free coffee to workers from an improvised counter. Damage to the Veterans Center had already been repaired, with upgrades underway. Betty stood outside, observing how her plan unfolded. The Black Wolves tried to burn Mythaven's spirit, but instead, they sparked something else, something no violence could snuff out. The war was far from over, but the rules had changed. Raven was about to learn a lesson in true strength that he would never forget. The Black Wolves' warehouse thrummed with tension as Raven watched surveillance footage on his laptop screen. His knuckles whitened around the beer bottle as he witnessed the transformation taking place in the heart of Mythaven. "They rebuilt everything," the serpent tattoo murmured in disbelief. "In one day, like we never even touched it." "Not everyone," Raven growled. "They have done more than just repair. Look closer." The footage revealed subtle but important changes. New surveillance cameras placed on every corner. Reinforced doors on businesses, veteran guards training shop owners in defensive tactics. What was once a vulnerable town was rapidly turning into a fortress. "They are coordinated," Diesel remarked quietly. "Military precision. This is not mere repair work. It is fortification." Raven slammed his beer bottle against the wall. The glass shattered. "This old woman is not just fighting back. She is changing the entire game." The warehouse door swung open and Mary, their inside informant, hurried in. His face was pale with worry. "We have a serious problem," he announced. Veteran guards submitted documents for official security contracts with 20 major businesses in the city 3 days ago. The papers were approved this morning. They are operating legally, licensed, bonded, insured. They are taking over our protection racket. Snake Tattoo understood. "Legally?" Raven's expression darkened. "What about police patrols? The routes I pay you for?" The clerk shook his head. "They have been feeding me false information. Police Chief Roberts knows there is a leak. I cannot risk passing anything else without exposing myself." Meanwhile, in the newly established Veteran Guards headquarters inside the old factory, Betty stood watching security feeds from across the city. Setting up a surveillance network was Sarah's idea. A way to protect the city by gathering evidence on any activities of the Black Wolves. "They are desperate," David observed, as he watched members of Raven's gang prowling the city's outskirts. They had lost income, their intelligence network was gone, and with it, the element of fear vanished. "Desperate people are dangerous people," Betty replied, recalling the harsh lessons learned during Vietnam. Raven was too proud to back down. He would attempt something big. Sarah entered holding a tablet that displayed financial records. "You were right to follow the money. The Black Wolves have been involved in more than just protection rackets. They have drug supply lines running through 3 states, using Mythaven as a distribution hub." Police Chief Roberts commented from his spot near the door. "That is federal territory. DIA will be very interested in this information." "Not yet," Betty said, studying the data. "We need to let them think they still have this option. Push them too hard, too fast, and they might do something truly reckless." Suddenly, the radio crackled with a message from the patrol unit. Several vehicles were entering the city of Ciavis from the north. This was no rumor. Heavy trucks, at least 4 of them. David approached the window, raising his binoculars. It seemed Raven had called in supplier reinforcements. These were not local boys. Betty watched the trucks through the surveillance network, noting their military precision. The involvement of the cartel was likely confirmed while Sarah reviewed her files. The Wolves acted as intermediaries between the major suppliers and the local distribution network. If they lose Mythaven, they lose everything. Everything has shifted, Betty concluded. She turned to address the room. This had grown beyond just our town. Raven had brought in players who would not care about any collateral damage. Outside, the trucks split up, taking different routes through the city. Veteran guard patrols maintained discreet surveillance, reporting their movements. They are establishing new safe houses, David observed, assigning their positions and spreading out their operations so that we cannot strike all at once. No, Betty corrected, noticing a pattern. They are surrounding us, creating a perimeter. This is no longer just about drugs. They are preparing for war. Chief of Police Roberts checked his sidearm. I should call the state police. Not yet, Betty insisted. The moment this becomes official, people will get hurt. We need to handle this our way first. She approached the map, marking the truck's locations. Raven is trying to show us he has powerful allies, but he also revealed something else. He is scared. He would not have brought in outside muscle if he thought he could manage this alone. What is our plan? David asked, trusting her tactical judgment as he did in Vietnam. We let them believe they are in control, Betty answered. Strategy. The idea was forming clearly in her mind. They allowed themselves to settle in, to become comfortable. Meanwhile, we gathered evidence, monitored their movements, studied their patterns. Sarah nodded with understanding. Like tracking the supply chain of VC? Exactly, confirmed Betty. But this time, we are collecting intelligence not just for our own sake. Every motion they make, every deal they carry out, we document meticulously, building a case so solid that when we involve the authorities, they will not only capture Raven, they will dismantle the entire network. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. They were not merely fighting for Mythaven anymore. They were challenging the whole criminal operation. It will get worse before it gets better, Betty warned. These new players will obey no rules. They will not care about the collateral damage. Then it is better to make sure there will be none, declared David. I want our patrols doubled, every business receiving extra protection. No one in Mythaven stands alone. As the sun set over the city, Betty watched trucks taking up new positions. Raven thought he was showing strength by bringing in outside forces. Instead, he revealed his weakness and gave us the chance to do more than just save Mythaven. We could shut down the entire criminal enterprise, but first we needed to survive what was coming, because Raven and his new allies would not give up without a fight. And this time, the battlefield would not be limited to the streets of Mythaven. They were present everywhere they could inflict harm on the city and its inhabitants. The real conflict was about to erupt. A week of intense tension gripped Mythaven like a tightly wound spring. Trucks and cartels took up their positions, transforming abandoned buildings into fortified outposts. The Black Wolves patrolled the streets with newfound audacity, backed by their dangerous allies. Betty sat in her living room well past midnight, studying surveillance photos spread across her coffee table. Sarah had set up a secure computer system, keeping her connected to the Veteran Guard's command center. Activity stirred in the northern safe house. Sarah's voice came through the encrypted radio. A major shipment is arriving. David's response was immediate. Document everything. We are building a case. A gentle knock on Betty's door drew her attention. Frank Vincent stood there, looking uneasy but determined. They came to me today, he said without preamble as Betty let him in. They had offered to buy his store for 3 times its value. Betty's eyes narrowed. They are not just trying to buy your store, Frank. They want to buy your silence. I know, he nodded. They are doing this all over the city, offering insane money for strategic spots. Some people are tempted. Before Betty could answer, the radio hissed again. Several vehicles were approaching from the south. It was not the cartel, nor the local police. Private military contractors. David's voice carried a dark tone. These were no street thugs. They were professional assassins. Betty watched as the newcomers dispersed through the window. Sleek black SUVs moved with precise coordination. Neither the cartel nor the local police were involved. Private military contractors, confirmed Sarah over the radio. It seemed Raven had called for more than just cartel backup. At the Black Wolves warehouse, Raven met with the mercenary commander, a cold-eyed man who introduced himself simply as Marshall. Your gang war has caught attention, Marshall stated flatly. My employers want this settled quickly and quietly. This is not a gang war, Raven protested. It's about respect. No, it's business, Marshall cut him off. The cartel cannot afford any disruption to their distribution network. You have 48 hours to resolve this, or we will handle it our way. The threat hung like smoke in the air. Raven's face twisted with rage and fear. What about the old veterans? Marshall's smile was like a razor blade. Professional problems need professional solutions. At the headquarters of the Guardians and Veterans, Betty called an emergency meeting. The situation had escalated beyond their original expectations. These contractors change everything, she explained to the assembled leaders. They are not thugs we can intimidate, or criminals we can outsmart. They are trained killers for hire. We have combat experience too, David reminded her. Yes, but we also have... There is something at stake, Betty insisted. They do not care about collateral damage. They are unconcerned about Mythaven. Sarah pulled up surveillance footage showing mercenaries taking positions. They were setting up sniper nests and planning escape routes. This was military tactical training. Then we respond in kind, David declared. We deploy our own resources. Betty shook her head. That is exactly what they want. An escalation forcing official intervention. When it turns into an open conflict, innocent people get caught in crossfire. So what is the plan? Chief Roberts asked, his face revealing the strain of recent events. Betty stepped closer to the map, her finger tracing patterns only she could perceive. We let them believe they have the upper hand, allowing them to grow confident. Meanwhile, we prepare for their real objective. What is it? Sarah inquired. I was just stating it, Betty replied. This cartel and mercenary business exists because Raven's pride will not permit retreat. He needs to prove he can break me to save face. The room fell silent as the full implications sank in. You are not suggesting... I am suggesting we give him what he wants, Betty confirmed. A clear shot at me, but on our terms, not his. That is too dangerous, Sarah protested. These are not thugs with poor intentions. They are professional killers. Betty's smile was faint, yet resolute. Just like the VC sniper, the individual who fired at our helicopter in Kassane. I am still here. She turned around to address the room. Raven believes that bringing in specialists gives him an advantage, but specialists follow patterns and stick to protocols. We can use this against them. The strategic session stretched until dawn as they refined their plan. The veteran guards appeared to be retreating, lessening their visible presence while actually strengthening their concealed positions. They will let the mercenaries think they are gaining the upper hand. Meanwhile, every movement, every communication, every exchange will be recorded. We are fighting not only for Mythaven, but also for every city these people might attack next, Betty reminded them. When the meeting ended, David took Betty aside. "You know they will come after you." "I am counting on it," she replied. Sometimes the best way to disable a trap is to trigger it deliberately. The sun rose over Methaven, casting long shadows from the mercenaries' sniper nests. In the growing light, two forces prepared for confrontation, one driven by pride and profit, the other by principle and protection. The upcoming 48 hours would decide not only the city's destiny, but also the future of everyone living there. Betty Harrison had faced death before, stared it down on helicopters during the Vietnam War. Now she would face it again on the streets of the city she had called home for 40 years. But this time, the stakes were even higher this time because she was fighting not only for survival, but for the very soul of Methaven. She was determined not to lose. The first warning sign arrived at dawn. The patrols of veteran guards, once a familiar sight in Methaven, suddenly vanished. Their absence left a noticeable emptiness on the morning streets. To any observer, it seemed the veterans had finally withdrawn. Betty walked alone toward Diana's cafe. Her pace was steady and unhurried. Through the reflective windows, she counted 3 mercenary teams tracking her every step. They were skilled, professional, and discreet, but she had spent too many years scanning jungle canopies for hidden threats to overlook their positions. "You shouldn't be here alone," said Diana, as Betty took her usual booth. "Not with those people watching." "That's exactly why I need to be here," Betty replied, accepting her regular coffee. "Let them watch." Marshall, the mercenary commander, watched from a parked SUV down the street. His cold eyes followed every move Betty made as he spoke into the secured radio. The target follows predictable patterns, moving openly, without cover. "Either she has grown careless, or this is a trap," Raven finished. His voice crackled over the radio. "It doesn't matter," Marshall replied. "Predictable targets. Dead targets. Trap or not." At the supposedly abandoned headquarters of the veteran guards, Sarah now lingered. She monitored hidden cameras covering every corner of the city. David stood behind her, observing several video feeds. 4 sniper squads, Sarah noted, marking positions on a digital map. Additionally, there were 3 ground units disguised as civilians. They were setting up a lethal zone, just as Betty predicted, David acknowledged. They were following standard elimination protocols, creating overlapping fields of fire. Sarah enlarged one feed, showing Raven nervously pacing outside his warehouse. He did not look pleased about the involvement of professionals. "He has lost control," David remarked. The cartel and mercenaries did not care about his personal vendetta. They simply wanted the problem eradicated. Throughout the morning, Betty stuck to her routine. She visited a hardware store, walked through the park, and stopped to chat with locals, all under the watch of mercenary teams recording her patterns. "She does this too effortlessly," Marshall commented to his deputy. Veterans did not give up this easily, especially not someone with her history. "Maybe she is tired," his subordinate suggested. "She is 75 years old." Marshall's expression darkened. "Age has nothing to do with this. I have seen her type before. Calm, those who have faced real war. They are the most dangerous." At the Black Wolves warehouse, Raven grew impatient. "Just take the shot. What are you waiting for?" "Professional work demands professional patience," Marshall replied over the radio. "We will get this done. Shall we do it right or not at all?" What nobody noticed was a subtle shift in the movements of the townspeople. Each time Betty paused to chat, information was being exchanged. Every friendly wave contained hidden messages. The veterans' guards did not retreat. Instead, they disappeared into the underground, blending in with the civilian population. David's voice came through Betty's concealed earpiece. "The cartel is moving the product through the northern safe house. We have everything on camera." "Good," Betty sub-vocalized, seemingly inspecting a storefront. "Keep documenting." "How ready is our guest to talk?" Sarah asked. "He is ready to speak." The guest was a clerk from City Hall who had been feeding information to the Black Wolves. The veterans' guards quietly picked him up the previous night, offering him a choice: full confession or federal charges. By late afternoon, the marshal had completed his preparations. His teams were in position, their fields of fire set, retreat routes planned. In his professional view, this was a flawless setup. "Green light for tonight," he informed his teams. "We finish this after sunset." Raven, listening via radio, smiled darkly. Finally, but in the gathering darkness, other movements went unnoticed. Veterans who appeared to have left town were quietly returning to occupy hidden spots. Surveillance gear recorded every mercenary's position, every cartel transaction, every movement of the Black Wolves. Betty sat in a cafe sipping her coffee. Diana was sipping her coffee as night fell, calm as ever. Through the window, she noticed the marshal's SUV approaching. The mercenary leader had decided to handle the matter personally. The bell above the cafe door chimed as the marshal entered, accompanied by two of his men. The other patrons, all disguised veteran guards, seemed unfazed. "Miss Harrison," the marshal said smoothly, as he slid into the booth opposite her. "I believe it is time we had a talk." Betty set down her coffee cup, meeting his cold stare with her own. "I thought you might stop hiding behind your scope." "It is a professional courtesy," the marshal replied calmly. A chance to end this quietly. The hint of amusement in Betty's voice was clear. "That is what they call being a paid killer now." The marshal's expression remained unchanged. "You have caused trouble for people who cannot tolerate trouble. Leave now, or do not leave at all." "I have faced better people than you," Betty answered steadily. "People who fought for something beyond money. What do you truly fight for, Marshal?" For a moment, something flickered in the mercenary's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or recognition. Then it vanished, replaced by cold professionalism. "You have 1 hour to leave the city," he said, standing up. "After that, what happens is no longer personal. It is just business." As the marshal and his men left the cafe, Betty smiled faintly. Everything proceeded exactly as intended. The mercenaries remained steadfast in their course of action. The cartel was transporting their merchandise, and Raven was about to learn a harsh lesson about true power. The next hour would change everything, but not in the way Marshall or Raven expected. While they were focused on Betty, they missed what was unfolding in the shadows. Within those shadows, a trap aged 90 years was about to close. The hour granted to the marshal was ticking down in a tense silence. Night had fully taken hold of Mythaven, turning familiar streets into a maze of darkness and hidden dangers. From his command vehicle, the marshal watched the timer on his tactical screen, counting down the final minutes. "All units, final position check," he ordered, his voice cold and professional. "Team 1, in position. Team 2, ready. Team 3, target acquired. Team 4, green." Betty remained inside her booth at Diana's cafe, seemingly ignoring the deadline. She appeared to be doing a crossword, though her pen hadn't moved for several minutes. "The target remains still," reported the observer. Still inside the cafe, no signs of guard activity from the veterans. The marshal frowned. In his experience, veterans with combat backgrounds never gave up so easily. Something felt off, but he couldn't pinpoint it. "Sir," his deputy spoke up, The cartels are reporting unusual traffic patterns on the city outskirts. Clarify, demanded the marshal. Nothing specific, just irregular gaps in their surveillance. Moments when their cameras went dark. Inside the warehouse of the Black Wolves, Raven paced nervously. Members of the cartel watched him with rising irritation. "This should have been resolved days ago," one of them said. "Your personal grudge is turning costly." "Just wait," Raven snapped back. "Once the old woman is gone, everything will return to normal." The cartel member's smile was as sharp as a razor blade. "Nothing will go back to normal after tonight. Changes are coming to how business is conducted here." At Betty's cafe, she glanced at her watch. Through a hidden earpiece, she heard Sarah's voice. "Everything is in position. DA teams are on standby. Understood?" Betty sub-vocalized. It was time to reveal their hand. The hour given by the marshal had reached 0. He lifted the radio, preparing to give the command that would end this conflict once and for all. But before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Every light in Mythane went out simultaneously. For a moment, the city was plunged into complete darkness. Then, one by one, powerful floodlights lit up from concealed spots, illuminating sniper nests and mercenary observation points with brilliant clarity. "We are compromised," Team 2 shouted over the radio. "Several hostiles approaching fast." The marshal grabbed his night vision goggles, scanning the suddenly chaotic scene. What he saw made his blood run cold. The veteran guards had not retreated. Instead, they had changed positions. Now they were emerging from cover all across the city. There, the movements displayed precise coordination and extensive preparation. "All teams, retreat to secondary positions," commanded Marshall. However, it was too late. Team 4 was pinned down. Team 1, taking heavy fire, lost contact with Team 3. Inside Betty's cafe, she remained calm as she stood by the window, watching chaos erupt outside. Diana and other customers revealed themselves as members of the veteran guards, moving with practiced efficiency to protect the building. Marshall spoke about Betty over the radio, fully aware that the mercenary leader was monitoring every channel. "I believe we need to discuss professional courtesy once again." Outside, the sound of helicopters filled the air. These were not military choppers, but DA aircraft maneuvering into position. The cartel's safe houses were surrounded by federal agents patiently awaiting this exact moment. "Did you plan this?" Marshall's voice crackled through the radio, blending notes of admiration and detached professionalism. Patterns, predictability. It was all part of the setup. "Of course," Betty replied. "Did you really think a Vietnam veteran would be that careless?" Marshall's SUV turned the corner only to find its path blocked by veteran guard vehicles. Every escape route, every fallback position, every emergency plan had been anticipated and countered. "You have two options, Marshall," Betty informed him. "Surrender now and face federal charges, or try to—" Breaking through against those who dedicated their lives to mastering the art of war was the challenge. What would the expert decision be? For a long moment, silence filled the radio waves. Then, from the surrender of a man who recognized when defeat came, the marshal's voice pierced the stillness. "Stop!" he commanded his units. "Stop! All squads halt!" The mercenaries, professional to the end, obeyed their leader's call. One after another they left their posts with hands raised. But the ordeal was not over, because while the experts capitulated, Raven and his Black Wolves had yet to be found and trapped. The most dangerous animals were those cornered. The night was about to grow even darker before dawn could break again over Mythaven. Raven stood in the Black Wolves' warehouse, watching through security monitors as his world disintegrated. DEA agents were escorting cartel members in handcuffs. Marshall's mercenaries surrendered with their usual professional pride. Everything he had built was falling apart. "This is the end," Diesel whispered quietly. "We must give up. The end." Raven's laughter teetered on the edge of madness. "This old woman thinks she has won. She does not understand what I am truly capable of." He moved to a locked storeroom, typing in the code. The door swung open, revealing what the cartel had stored. Enough explosives to destroy half the Mythaven city center. The boss with the snake tattoo stepped back, eyes wide. "This goes too far. We are bikers, not terrorists." "We are what I say we are," Raven shouted while loading explosives into the van. "If I cannot have Mythaven, then neither can anyone else." At the headquarters of the guards and veterans, Sarah's voice cracked with urgency over the radio. "Betty, we have activity at the warehouse. Thermal images show them loading something into vehicles." "What kind of something?" David asked as he watched the streams. Based on the heat signatures, Sarah's voice faltered. "Military-grade explosives." Betty's mind raced through the possibilities. This was no longer about territory or pride. This was about destruction. She commanded all units. Her voice was firm despite the gravity of the situation. Raven had become an outcast. He carried enough explosives to topple the entire city. "We need to stop him before he reaches any populated areas." The veteran guards mobilized instantly. Their bikes roared to life. Even the surrendered mercenaries appeared uneasy. Professional killers had lines they would not cross, and Raven had just crossed them. "You are not going out there?" David protested as Betty headed for her vehicle. "No way," she answered. "This started with me, and I am going to finish it." The Black Wolves burst from their warehouse in a convoy of bikes and vans. Raven led the charge. Many of his own gang members refused to follow him that far. But the ones who stayed were the most dangerous people with nothing left to lose except their thirst for revenge. "You should have left me alone, old woman." Raven's laughter crackled sharply through the intercepted radio signals. "Now everyone will witness what true power looks like." Betty did not respond to his taunts. She quickly turned down the alleyway. Her mind calculated angles and distances just as she had in Vietnam while planning evacuation routes. "Ciara," she called over the radio, "remember that construction site on Maple Street? The new shopping center. What about it? Have your team move ahead of Raven. Force him to turn east on 3rd Street." David's voice came through. "The construction site was a dead end." "Exactly," Betty replied. The veterans' guards moved into position. Their motorcycles, chasing the Black Wolves convoy, headed precisely where Betty wanted. Raven, focused on his mission of destruction, failed to realize he was being maneuvered until it was far too late. The convoy burst onto the construction site, only to discover they were trapped. Concrete barriers blocked every exit except the one they came through, which was now filled with the veterans' guards on motorcycles. Raven jumped off his bike, pulling a detonator from his jacket. "Fall back!" he shouted. His hand trembled over the detonator. One click, and the entire place would blow up. Betty's Ford stopped at the site entrance. She stepped out slowly, her movements deliberate. "Is this what you wanted, Raven?" she called to him. "To prove you are the most dangerous person in Mythaven. Congratulations! You have shown you are willing to kill innocent people to satisfy your ego." "Shut up!" Raven shouted furiously, his finger tensing on the detonator. "Did you do this? Did you turn everyone against me?" Betty stepped forward calmly and answered, "No, you did this yourself. Every time you chose fear over respect. Every time you mistook cruelty for strength." The remaining Black Wolves glanced uncertainly between their leader and the growing force surrounding them. They had signed up for a gang, not a death sentence. "One more step and I will do it," Raven threatened. "I will take us all down." Betty kept moving closer, her gaze locked onto him. "No, you will not. Because deep down you are still that scared little boy trying to prove he is tough. True power is not about who you can hurt, Raven. It is about who you can protect." For a moment, something flickered in Raven's eyes. Doubt, fear, maybe even understanding. Then his finger tightened again on the detonator, but before he could press it, a shot rang out. Diesel, his oldest friend and lieutenant, had made his decision. The bullet struck Raven's hand, sending the detonator flying. The final stand of the Black Wolves ended not with an explosion, but with the click of handcuffs and the quiet sobs of a broken man. As federal agents secured the explosives and rounded up the remaining gang members, Betty stood watching the scene unfold. The night had nearly turned tragic, but something else happened instead. Redemption, in a way, came from within the gang itself. "You knew," David said, stepping forward to join her. She asked quietly, "Did you know someone would stop him?" Betty replied with certainty, "I always believed his own people would choose the right path. Sometimes the greatest victory does not mean defeating an enemy, but rather helping them awaken their conscience." The dawn was nearing, bringing with it the promise of a new beginning for Mythavan. Yet the story was far from finished. There remained one lesson to learn and one truth to uncover. A year later, Mythavan had transformed into something unimaginable. The morning sun rose over a city that had not only survived its darkest hour, but had been reborn through it. Betty Harrison, now 76, sat in her once familiar booth at Diana's Cafe. Watching the street with quiet pride, she noticed that the Veterans Guards still kept a presence, yet had evolved beyond mere protectors. Their headquarters, housed in an old factory, was now a community hub, offering job training, counseling, and support for anyone seeking to rebuild their lives. A familiar voice called out, "Good morning, Miss Betty." It belonged to James, formerly known by his nickname Snake Tattoo. His leather jacket still bore the emblem of the Black Wolves, but above it was a new patch that read, "Veterans Guards Civilian Assistant." Betty asked as he joined her with his own coffee, "How is the mentorship program going, James?" He smiled and said, 3 more former gang members are starting next week." "A week?" he smiled. "The news is spreading to other towns." People are eager to learn how Mythavan achieved this transformation. Through Betty's window, she could observe other shifts taking place. Frank Vincent's hardware store was flourishing, now managed together by Frank and 2 former wolves who had discovered their knack for business. Udiana's Cafe had become a gathering spot where veterans and reformed gang members sat side by side, sharing stories and wisdom. David entered, taking his usual seat opposite Betty. "Just received word from the Marshal," he announced. "He is granted early release for cooperation. He still plans to join us once he's free." "All right," Betty nodded. "We need people who understand both sides of the divide." Sarah Chen arrived next, carrying a thick folder. "The government is interested in our rehabilitation program. They want to use Mythavan as a blueprint for other communities facing similar challenges." "Tell them this is not about programs," Betty replied firmly. "It is about believing people can change, if given the opportunity." Outside, a group of motorcycles rode past, members of the Veterans Guard alongside former Black Wolves. Their bikes were no longer symbols of intimidation, but of unity. They were heading to the old warehouse district, now being redeveloped into affordable housing and small businesses. "Remember when all this began?" David asked, watching the riders. "One phone call." "Just one phone call," Betty agreed. "But that was never truly the point. It was about showcasing a different kind of strength. Diesel, now the civilian coordinator for community safety, appeared in the doorway. "They are ready for you at the ceremony, Betty." The event was held in the town square where a new memorial was being dedicated. Not one celebrating conflict or victory, but transformation. The crowd gathered reflected every part of Mythaven. Veterans, former gang members, business owners, and families all standing side by side. When Betty stepped up to the podium, she looked across the faces before her. Each one told a story of change, redemption, and finding a better way. The memorial behind her bore a simple inscription: "Strength through unity. Peace through understanding." 1 year ago, she began, Mythaven stood at a crossroads. We could have chosen revenge, fighting fire with fire. Instead, we chose something much harder. We chose to believe in the power of change. As she spoke, a lone motorcycle approached. It was Raven's younger brother, recently released from prison. He had written to Betty from behind bars, asking if second chances still existed in Mythaven's family. Her response was straightforward. "Come home. We will help you find your way." "We have built something here stronger than fear," Betty continued. "Something unbreakable, because it is not based on power over others, but power with them. This is the true legacy of Mythaven." The applause that followed was not just for her words. They were for hope reborn and a community united. Everything they accomplished together stood for a city that confronted its own demons and emerged stronger, for people who summoned the courage to change. Later, as the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold, Betty sat on her porch with David and Sarah. The distant sound of motorcycles no longer carried tension. It was simply a reminder of how far they had come. "You know," David reflected, "when you made that first call, I thought we were just going to chase some troublemakers out of town." "I thought the same," admitted Betty. "But sometimes the greatest victories are the ones you never expected." A group of children rode past on bicycles. Following them was an escort of veteran guards, not because the kids needed protection any longer, but because the riders had become part of an extended family, the heart of the community. "The town calls it a miracle," Sarah mentioned. But was it truly a miracle? "No," Betty smiled, watching the last rays of sun color the streets she helped transform. It was simply people discovering their best selves. Sometimes they just need someone who believes they can. This was the real triumph in Mythaven. Not defeating an enemy, but changing it. Not winning a war, but ending the need for one. One phone call started it all, but it was love, courage, and faith in the power of change that brought it to an end. And in the end, that made all the difference. As the stars appeared above Mythaven, Betty, she understood that the city she had helped rescue would keep evolving, continuing to grow and transform, proving that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope for redemption, always a chance to discover light amid the shadows. Sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to make the call. On that quiet evening, sitting on her porch and hearing the laughter of children mixed with the roar of motorcycles, Betty Harrison realized the most important truth of all. She had not simply saved a city or changed some lives. She had shown that an 80-year-old woman with a courageous spirit and faith in human kindness could alter the world, and that love will always triumph over fear. As the final ray of the sun slipped below the horizon, Betty closed her eyes and smiled. Tomorrow would bring a new day, fresh opportunities to help, new lives to touch, and she would be ready.